It is Saturday the 11th of the 10th, 2025. The time is 10 minutes past 8. And as always, that means that there are very many F1-centric threads at which we need to pull. We'll talk about some Scuderia Ferrari, Charles Leclerc, none too happy. It is chaos over there at the red team with the yellow badge and the black prancing horse atop. We'll talk about Carlos Sainz, WAG Gate. Is there too much circus in Formula One and not enough circuit? We'll talk about Carlos Sainz now chiming in on Mercedes and their probability of nailing it in 2026 at the altar of an OP power unit and therefore winning championships in perpetuity. We'll talk about George Russell falling out per se with Toto, the boy who cried wolf, at the altar of double jeopardy of some sort. Can you be a manager and a team principal and ride both of those horses simultaneously? We'll talk about Gunther Steiner. We'll talk, of course, about McLaren team orders. We'll talk about Mohammed bin Sulayem. We'll talk about F1 TV. In the first instance, however, it's important that we cover this WAG Gate, isn't it? Because everybody's talking about it. Every man and their dog. Is there too much circus in Formula One and not enough circuit? I understand that at the time of writing, it is the Drive to Survive era. It is kayfabe. It is shtick. It has to be stardom. Therefore, with a view to get and keep the fabled 18 to 35-year-old demographic and their attention dollars, they need to see something that's not too dissimilar to what they saw, what attracted them to the sport in the very first place in Netflix's Drive to Survive. Sexy up the sport, therefore, they will say. And when you see the WAGs, that ticks a box, doesn't it? Of course it does, if you're talking about the Drive to Survive generation. However, you've got to straddle both horses at the same time, right? In getting and keeping the Drive to Survive generation, a TikTok generation, Generation Z, what you don't want to do is cheese off those who brought you to the dance, the grey, old, grizzled F1 vets that are here for nothing but racing, the Jim Clark fans out there, the Ayrton Senna fans, the Graham Hill and Phil Hill fans, you know those ones. What you're doing in putting that up, I mean, I get it, I understand it. You got to tick two boxes at the same time, and you can do that production if you are savvy. This is like the MBS and the FI. Nobody would care about Mohammed bin Sulayem's numerous multitudinous indiscretions if he Bill Belichicked and did his job. Nobody wants to hear about Transponder Gate or some shaky institution of the rules and regs, particularly when you're kikiing with the drivers on the podium. Similar thing here. Indulge me in this analogy. This is important, chat. If they show the WAGs, do you know what I mean? If they pan to Charles Leclerc's misses and same too with Lando Norris, but then they capture all of the relevant bits and bobs, all of the automotive pugilism that matters at the Singapore Grand Prix. Mention no names, Carlos Sainz's heroics in the dying embers of the Grand Prix. So too Lance Stroll. The beef that ensued on track between Lewis and Fernando Alonso, arch nemesis, then nobody would care. But because we're missing out on those things and there is a perceived fallacy equivalent, I don't think we're missing out on those bits and bobs because of the WAGs, because Thomas Mayer and Kim Illman both have gone away and done their research. Here's what Kim Illman says, that over the course of a 1 hour 41 minute stream at the Singapore Grand Prix, we only saw WAGs for a net 15 seconds. Tom Mayer of Planet F1, all F1 journos are created equally, but some are created more equal than others, says that it was a tad more than the 15 seconds that we got WAGs for. It was circa 20, minuscule as a percentage of the whole, but it's not, is it, if we're missing things on track? Put the WAGs on, cool, whatever, it's glamour, I get it, I understand the modus operandi, Drive to Survive era settings, copy. However, if we're missing action on track, you are going to irk fans, and F1 fans, when unhappy, are women scorned. Are they not? Oh, and by the way, Ariosto, oh, the humanity. We're going in today, do you know what I mean? We're going long. It's the Saturday night show, and there is a lot to cover. Saw more WAGs than overtakes. And I don't disagree, Michael, but if they'd been more bloody strategic with the production, You could have got both, is the point that I'm trying to make. You didn't need to think that you were gaining WAGs and losing overtakes. It's because the production was so bad, you would be forgiven for thinking that. Because again, all you saw over the course of the 20 seconds of a 1 hour 41 minute Grand Prix were WAGs. Lewis had for some fireworks. Go on, let me tell you this, because it gets techier than techie things. Let me show you this, because the McLaren thing is not going away. Check this out. Can you spell corporate peacocking? Look natural, lads. No bias to see here. McLaren over the last few days have put Oscar Piastri front and central in a way that's almost unnatural. The corporate peacocking, the overcompensating, let's say, is bloody loud at this juncture. Zak Brown wants to be Mr. Egalitarian, doesn't he? But I don't think he is. Check this out again. And this is one of a multitude, a gazillion videos currently on the McLaren F1 Twitter. Check this out. I mean, it's blink twice again, Oscar, if you need help, isn't it? It feels so fake and contrived. Look, they said, Zak Brown and Andreas Stella, that they'll have conversations with both of the drivers, that if one wins the championship, is the team free to go and celebrate, because you get a medal and you get a medal and you get a medal. Nobody wants to hurt anybody's feelings, not named Oscar Piastri. Because if you're instituting for that, you'll be forgiven, right, if it's consistent. But again, when Oscar Piastri's feelings are hurt, it's like, well, no, we'll investigate that after the race, Oscar. No investigation from the FIA. Well, how about the 5.9 second pit stop that happened in Italy? You intervened in that without compunction. We're all too keen, Zak Brown, to put your thumb on the weighing scales of competition then, because it was Lando. Because that's your mate. The dude, as far as Lando Norris and Zak Brown's involvement, people say there's no conflict of interest, that this happens all the time. But if Zak Brown is director, or at least was director and CEO on paper per Companies House official documents, if he was that as far as quadrant, Lando Norris's esports team and company, then you bet your bottom dollar as far as mens rea that there will be motivation. Zak Brown, if he had his choice, would choose Lando Norris as the winner. Of course he would. I don't even know how you could argue anything to the contrary. Now where we have ourselves a discussion is whether there is actus rea, whether Zak Brown is acting on that, whether he's doing something in real time to make sure to bring about his desired outcome. Now you can look at Monza, you can look at Australia, Hold Station, Oscar Piastri. So too you could look at the British Grand Prix, and then your latest and greatest exhibit A, B and C happened at Singapore Grand Prix, didn't it? That was fair racing, said Zak Brown. I don't know what's going on here. I don't know, but they're going to have to resolve it. And Gunther Steiner's come out and spoken about this rather pragmatically, as Gunther Steiner only can. Here's what Gunther said. If they harbour aspirations to win a drivers' championship in 2025, they need to stop dicking around here. They need to pour all of their efforts into Oscar Piastri, lest they wish for a fire-breathing dragon in a soon-to-be 5-time champion called Maximilian Verstappen to sneak in the back door and steal the lunch money of Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, just as did Kimi Raikkonen in 2007 to Alonso and Sir Lewis Hamilton. True, Gunther Steiner, preach. This is Formula One. You can't afford to leave any tents on the table at the altar of any philanthropic activity. It isn't participation Olympics. Everybody won't get a medal, although you might want it to be like that. Zak Brown and Andreas Stella. It will not be like that. No, it cannot, because it is F1. Gunther Steiner's absolutely on the money here. Of course he's on the money. Absolutely nailed it. And then Bernie Ecclestone's chimed in as well, hasn't he? He said, you know what, if there's a second best driver on the grid after Max, he has a name and his name is Oscar Piastri. Bernie says Oscar Piastri gets the job done. When he makes mistakes, he knows he's made them and he doesn't blame others, mention no names, Lando Norris, or come up with excuses. He makes sure he doesn't repeat them. He doesn't make the same mistake twice. He's the best driver, says Bernie Ecclestone. Quote, after Max Verstappen, if I were a team owner, I think I'd get onto the Australian kid. Max is the best driver ever, he says. We'll have a conversation about this another day, I'm telling you. No doubts. I used to say Alan Prost was. Now I would say Max, that he's the greatest. He's the brightest. With regard to getting the best out of the car, he doesn't muck around. Well, no kidding, Sherlock. There have certainly been some drivers who were better than today's drivers, but who never had the chance to show their strengths to anyone. Techier than techie things, that. How do you like them Bernie Ecclestone apples? I don't know. I mean, can you argue about best ever? Well, you can't argue that Max Verstappen is in the conversation. You could talk about Lewis and Senna and Alan Prost if you wanted to, Jim Clark even, Fangio, Michael Schumacher. But to remove Max from the conversation is to declare oneself as an F1 abbot of unreason at this point. But I say all that to say, Bernie Ecclestone chiming in now, Gunther Steiner chiming in now, Oscar Piastri's team looking at Zach et al. And saying, you know, we'll go to Ferrari if you're not going to give us a fair shake. All we ever asked for. Now it feels like pressure cooker settings over at McLaren. What are they going to do, chat? Non-rhetorical question. One to which I do not know the answer. I think he's going to get techier than techie things, especially if Max continues to close that vice on them, impose his very unique pressure upon them over the next 6 races. It will get techier than techie things. Go on then. Let's talk about Carlos Sainz and Mercedes. And we have this conversation under the aegis of forward projecting and forecasting. 2026, you know the drill already. Brand new rule and reg set. Half the power unit, half of it will be internal combustion, half of it will be electric. It is all about sustainable fuel. Therefore, who better to have the whip hand as a probabilistic equation than the boys and girls from Brackley and Brixworth? The context looks something like this. You've heard James Allerton say that the feeling around Brackley and Brixworth isn't dissimilar from 2014 when it was split turbo hybrid settings, after which Mercedes won back-to-back constructors to the tune of 8. That, ladies and gentlemen, is unprecedented settings. That's James Allison saying that, and there is a feeling up and down Middle England not dissimilar. You guys know that F1 is always super incestuous, that all the engineers are talking, all the power unit guys are talking, and there's a prevailing sentiment that Mercedes, as at the time of writing, have the whip hand, that in their power unit project, there will be durable competitive advantage come 2026. And Carlos Sainz underlines this. Remember, Carlos was meant to join Red Bull and then they didn't want to sign him, and then potentially Mercedes and they didn't want him. And then why can't he stay at Ferrari? Well, Ferrari wants him back because Lewis isn't doing it. And all of this stuff is context, but important context nevertheless. As far as Carlos Sainz is concerned, he said one of the key reasons why he ended up at Williams and didn't go somewhere else was because of that Mercedes and its perceived durable competitive advantage. He says, yes, I have a lot of confidence in that Mercedes engine. He continues, quote, it's actually one of the main reasons why I chose Williams for this new regulation change. I knew we'd be running Mercedes power units and everything I've heard about it has been positive, and it still is. That's Carlos Sainz talking. Mr. 200 level IQ. 4 moves, checkmating 4 moves. Mr. Gary Kasparov of Formula One, the man who translates technical feedback into useful messages for the engineers. He's the best of that. You know that a rising Carlos tide floats all constructors' boats. Ergo, when he joins a constructors team, if past his prologue, he leaves them in a better position in the constructors than when he joined. He's that guy. And that he says that he's aligned with James Allison's thinking makes you know that Mercedes potentially had that they were in a shout at the very least for having the god-tieriest power unit as at 2026. Why is this techie though, chat? Because what does it mean for Max and what does it mean for George? Because there were only 2 spaces, 2 seats at the Mercedes AMG Petronas in, are they not? And George Russell looks to be having conversations in real time about one of them. It's going to get techie. Danny, then why does Max have less points than Oscar? Oh, all fuel is bio, but all biofuel is worse than the normal one. Daniel says, David, that's the argument. Cameron CC, Carlos is a very smooth operator. Timac says, I properly hope Williams can take a leap forward to top the field, just like in the 2000s. Me too, kind of. Cam, did you hear about Dunn leaving McLaren? Michael, I feel like we've covered that already, mate, a gazillion times. Cameron, how many people steeped in F1 history, including top tier drivers, past and present, have to say that Max is the GOAT before it's just seen as it's happening, John, in real time, mate? You see that the likes of James Allen is coming out and saying it. Nico Rosberg was trackside talking about Max's ability to balance and manipulate the car on and around the limits of adhesion. You've heard all that over the past couple of weeks. Damon Hill's come out and reneged on his Dick Dastardly tactic statements. Everybody's coming out now because the evidence is almost insurmountable, chat. How are you going to do one of these and not be called an abbot of unreason? Go on, let me tell you about George Russell then, because this is important, chat, as far as defining the next couple of years in Maximilian Verstappenville, Mercedes, and King George Russell. This is the context, chat. George Russell has been brilliant this year. Whatever you want to say about him, whatever you want to say about the dude's personality, you can love or loathe yourself some George Russell. It matters not. What matters is that he's been brilliant this year. I would put forth that there's only been one or maybe two drivers better than him. Max, of course, brilliant, outperforming the car. Suzuka, Saudi Arabia, we've talked about them ad nauseum at this point. There is no one on that grid that can do Mission Impossible the way that Max does it, and with the frequency that Max does it. That's just generally accepted fact at this stage, lest you wish to be deemed an abbot of unreason. Piastri maybe as well, in with a shout. Apart from that, name me a chap on that grid who has outperformed George Russell season to date. There is not one. And so how, therefore, does he still not have a contract? Well, here's how. Because Toto Wolff dragged his feet. Suffice to say that he wanted Maximilian Verstappen. He wants to pay. He wants to deliver upon that project. He wants to amend for the mistakes of Christmas past when he had the opportunity to sign Max, but he didn't because there was no room at the Mercedes AMG in. So John Perry, you're an absolute legend as always, sir. I'm grateful. Out here gifting memberships. If you are so inclined as a brand new member, get yourself over to the community tab, and shortly thereafter the Discord, using which we continue these very noddy B-spec F1 modes of discourse. Here's what George is thinking. George is like, give me that contract, and not just the 1 year. This nonsense. Listen, you guys are going to pay a penalty for this. You dragged your feet while Max Verstappen was on the market because you thought you were going to get him and sacrifice me at his altar. George is like, well, now who else are you going to get? Who else can fill Lewis Hamilton's not insubstantial size 9s? Nobody, not named George Russell. So give me the contract that I want, and that looks like this. Not a 1+1, not the 1+1 deal that saw Lewis Hamilton ultimately jump ship and go to pastures. And you mentioned no name, Scuderia Ferrari. Give me a 2+1. You're out here tweeting my name about I'm Mr. Mercedes, no longer Mr. Saturday, because of the performance that I keep putting down. So George is like, give me the contract that I want, a 2+1. If you're really no longer invested in Max Verstappen, well then don't be invested in Max Verstappen, not just for 2026, but for 2027 as well. Give me the 2-year contract that my performances so deserve. You've heard Toto come out and say, well, if you need a multi-year contract, then you're not really a racing driver. That matters not. George Russell has earned it by dint of his performances. The way that can you imagine Lando in that scenario right there? That his team principal is flirting his eyes at Max Verstappen. Lando wouldn't even come out of the bloody show. Chaos. Lando would sit in the motorhome and he would be bricking it. George Russell went 10 toes down and said, you know what, I can manage this. And for that, he deserves credit in the first instance. And in the second, a multi-year contract. Give that dude whatever he wants. Now, word on the F1 curb is that he wants a $30 million or £30 million, contract. That puts him up there, right there with Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, both of whom are on a £30 million contract a year. How can you give Oscar, if this is free market principles, how can you give Oscar a £30 million contract per year and the same to Lando, and George doesn't deserve that? Behave yourself. Unacceptable, unfathomable even. You couldn't write it in a book because they wouldn't believe you. That, ladies and gentlemen, in the words of Oscar Piastri, that's not fair. George Russell has put that W16 on his back and put it in places that it didn't deserve to be, not dissimilar to Maximilian Verstappen's performances in the year that is 2025. Give him the contract then. Antonelli wouldn't have done that. There would be nowhere in the constructors but for George's bloody performances this year, and Toto wants to drag his feet. Give that dude what he wants. Now, rumour is potentially $5 million for George's outlet. Behave yourself, Easy G. How very dare they offer that dude $5? If they've offered him $5 million, you can well understand why George might be fuming. Love or loathe him, it does not matter. What matters is that by dint, under the aegis of the performance in 2025, George deserves at the very least, to a penny, what Lando and Oscar are on. I don't care what anybody wants to say. And that's what George will be saying to Toto. And what makes it more complicated, chat, let's go on 30 million. He's just signed a brand new one, hasn't he? And that's going to get techie over there soon. That McLaren circumstance is going to get very techie. But as far as George is concerned, what makes it more techie is that his manager and team principal occupy the same body. He has a name, and his name is Toto, the boy who cried wolf. Now, it's not uncommon in Formula One. Fabio was team principal to Fernando and manager for as long as I can remember their time at Renault Benetton. Well, this is different now. I don't think now that's all well and good if you're both batting at the same crease. But if there is a difference in opinion, if your manager keeps flirting with Maximilian Verstappen, even as brilliant a commercial mind, a billionaire, now a team owner, 33% of Mercedes F1 is how much Toto, the boy who cried wolf, and even with all of that said, if you are disagreeing on that, what you can't afford to have if you are George is not having an independent management and a management team independent, of your team principal, because Toto's marking his own homework, right? This is double jeopardy. There should, if processes are good, there should be a Chinese wall, schemes of delegation between your team principal and your manager, surely, because they're negotiating different points. Their positions should be diametrically, fundamentally opposed, orthogonal to one another. In Toto, the boy who cried wolf, they are not. He can lowball himself. Do you know what I mean? George is saying I'm worth 30 million. Toto's saying, well, hang on. No, you're not. I'm your manager and your team principal, mate. I own 33% of the company. 30, try 10. George, that's the conversation that they'll be having. Oh, and by the way, George, you know all that sponsorship that you've been doing? We're going to increase it next time you sign. You're not going to be able to focus on F1. You're going to have to do more. You're Mr. Mercedes. Now, George is like, what do you want? I want to be winning championships here. So if anything, you want to dial back my sponsorship commitments, not dial up. And therein lies the difference. That's why they're having that conversation. Gunther Steiner's come out and he said that George Russell has all the negotiating power now that Max is off the table for 2026. Because who else are they going to get there to lead Mercedes as a team? What, Kimi? Kimi's going to lead that? You're having a laugh. What, drag up Valtteri Bottas, who's just signed a deal with Cadillac F1? Well, that ship's sailed, right? Who else is there? Charles Leclerc, potentially, if he continues to lose his mind at the red team with the yellow badge, the black prancing horse atop. Well, here's what Gunther says. Gunther says that time is leverage for George Russell, that he holds all of the keys in negotiation, the ongoing negotiation with Toto Wolff. And you know that it's an ongoing negotiation because Toto keeps trying to tell you that it's coming soon. Wait patiently. Where is it, Toto? Nowhere to be seen as at the time of writing. Here's what Gunther says. That George holds all the leverage in the contract talks with Mercedes, that there's no clear alternative going forward for 2026. He dismisses the tension claims with Toto Wolff, adding that Russell is right to demand a long-term deal as a top driver and he should deserve, therefore, top pay after leading the team post Sir Lewis Hamilton. I think there is friction, Gunther Steiner. Not that I would know differently to Gunther Steiner, but I think there is friction. Not before the world's press and media, because George Russell is nothing if not a professional. But you think George is looking at him like, but hang on, how can I be a fire-breathing F1 driver who believes that he's the fastest one on the grid, and you're flirting eyes at Max Verstappen? Do you see me put a 10th? Is what George Russell be saying. You see me put a 10th in qualifying on Max, both at the Singapore Grand Prix and at the Canadian Grand Prix, in a car that's not fit for purpose. You better give that dude the contract. What are we doing here? Honestly, chat, it gets techier than techie things. Oh, and by the way, can we talk some Mohammed bin Sulayem for a hot second? Because this one's techie. All and sundry, all F1 publications, for the avoidance of doubt, are made equal, but some are made equal than others. All and sundry now coming out and saying MBS is set to run unopposed for the FIA presidential elections in December of this year. Joe Saywood, though, adds an additional wrinkle. Whilst that's true, at the altar, this weird president's list that you need a nomination from all the different federations, and from South America, there is only one candidate, one VP, and that VP, being Bernie Ecclestone's missus, has given her vote to Mohammed bin Sulayem. There are no other candidates in South America. So under that aegis, therefore, Mohammed bin Sulayem will run unopposed. But Tim Mayer's not daft. He would have known before he ran, he would have known these rules, and he would have had himself a presidential list candidate. Here's what I'm going to read this out because this is important. Joe Saywood says the following in his latest and greatest newsletter, by the way. Quote, our understanding is that Tim Mayer may have had a candidate for the two regions, but they've since been excluded by the nominations committee. What is this, chat? You can't amend the rules in real time. You can't make this an authoritarian regime whilst you're impact. This makes no sense. What are we doing here? Key question, therefore, says Joe Saywood, is what has caused some of the candidates to be excluded from the list of eligible. You know how this? Let me set the scene properly. This is important here. Let me tell you who you're dealing with in Mohammed bin Sulayem. His latest expose, Exhibit A, B, and C. You remember there was an audit committee whose remit it was to ensure that everything in the FIA, as far as its behaviour and code of conduct, all of those I's were dotted and all of those T's were crossed. Any self-respecting president of the FIA then would welcome that, unless of course they were doing something dodgy, that they were rife with conflict of interest, that they were flying on private jets, all the while screaming about sustainability, and then in the second breath expensing all of those private jet expenses to the FIA. Conflict of interest, aka hypocrisy. Audit committee was set there again to tick and cross, to mark the homework of all of the FIA personnel as far as their processes and their codes of conduct. You know what Mohammed bin Sulayem did? Disbanded a lot of them. There were 4 on there. There were 4 of 6. He got rid of 4 of 6, excuse me. What? What are we doing? That's why Dave Richards was like, hang on, you can't do this. He was dismissing these guys and then amending for the rules and regs and the bloody constitution in real time, whilst dismissing anybody who was not a yes man and potentially would have opposed him. That's why I think these things have occurred, because Mohammed bin Sulayem in the background has amended the bloody constitution, what's needed to get elected, and anybody that opposed him, he dismissed. That's why you see the bloody rate of churn. Of course, this is conjecture and speculation, but it doesn't take much to read the FIA tea leaves. Joe Saywood continues, the key question, therefore, from Mayer's perspective, the other presidential candidate capable of deposing Mohammed Ben Sulayem. The key question, therefore, is what has caused some of the candidates to be excluded from the list of eligible candidates. The possible reasons for exclusion are that a proposed candidate comes from a club that is not behind on fees, holds the sporting power in that country, and has at least one competition listed on the 2025 international sporting calendar. They might also be rejected if they are too old and not fit and proper persons, which might include such things as a criminal record. Chat. Do you remember that investigation that's going on into Mohammed Ben Sulayem's activities? But I digress. Joe Saywood continues, quote, having said that, Mayor will have known, all the grounds that might cause an exclusion, and so would not logically enter a candidate if he knew they would be rejected. Thus, it's logical to assume that none of the aforementioned are the reasons for exclusion. Quote, the need to obtain vice presidents for sport has given control over whether or not there can be a contested election at all to the FIA's sports regions. This chap Ward continues. Moreover, the use of the support agreements in advance of the elections makes it very hard for a candidate to obtain the required vice presidents for their list. So you need a vice president from one of the bloody federations to get over the line as a potential candidate. It's not going to happen unless something changes, unless something crops up from all of these investigations going on in the background into Mohammed Ben Sulayem's activities. Then Mohammed Ben Sulayem will be your FIA president for the foreseeable future. Oh, the humanity, chat. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't a two-way rune ghost, so not official yet. But yeah, it's intense. 500 kilometres. Are we talking about Bathurst? Your boy needs to lock in. The EU will do investigation. Not the EU, it's the DOJ. Johan, apparently, so I'm told. Man, the FIA is starting their slow descent into becoming the new fit. 100% Timac. But you heard us talk about it the other day. Joe Saywood speculates that if this investigation in the background into Mohammed Ben Sulayem's activities as the president of the FIA yields anything, that then just like what happened with FIFA and Sepp Blatter, the findings will be submitted to the DOJ. And there are other things going on in the background: arbitration with High-Tech, conflict of interests as far as Toto Wolff is concerned, criminal proceedings, or civil at the very least, in French courts. What are your thoughts about Charles and his deep satisfaction and the Scuderia? Do you think we need to go on and let's talk about this as we round third base time? And you guys are legends, each and every single one of you. I make no apology for labouring this point. This community, this channel ceases to exist, doesn't drive to thrive or thrive and drive without you guys here. Oh, and by the way, Charles Leclerc's had enough, as has Sir Lewis. This is nonsense. John Elkann wants Christian Horner. He has always wanted Christian Horner. Let me be precise with my language. Frederick Vasseur, though, at the time when they extended his contract, he was the only person standing when the music stopped. You know what I mean? Jonathan Wheatley gone, Christian Horner dealing with 1,000 different things, spinning a very many different plates. So that, of course, they had to extend Frederick Vasseur's contract, lest they wish to find themselves team principal less. Does that mean he was the right man for the job? Potentially. Does that mean that John Elkann thought he was the right man for the job? Absolutely not. Christian Horner is the man who they wanted. And now all reports, and again, all F1 journals are created equally and all that, but all reports are saying that Christian Horner is banging there because John Elkann is desperate to get himself another team principal. It's nonsense. What's been going on? Look, same thing that why Christian Horner got sacked for. As far as all the political stuff and the Jos Verstappen and the team will implode and Max Verstappen's not... All that boiled down to the misconduct, the allegation gate, the coercive behaviour, all that Christian Horner, equity, not having it. Ultimately, when you full stop new paragraph, rules of first principle. Had Christian Horner been winning races and championships potentially, nobody would have cared. They would have left him to his own devices. They would not have sacked him. All of this boils down to performance. Performance has everything. All of the prior indiscretions fade to black. If Frederick Vasseur were winning races, do you think there would be this conversation about Christian Horner joining the red team with a yellow badge and the black prancing horse on top? Absolutely not. So John, you're a legend. Just a post-George thought. Mr. Russell has led Mercedes to a solid second place in the constructors. That says something. Also, in a billion Petronas Mercedes adds, yeah, they deserve some. He's not been bad, Sir John. They've got to give him his props. I was downloading some images before I came on here. Bloody Mercedes on their Twitter are like, yeah, Mr. Mercedes. Yeah, now all of a sudden he's winning, that he's dragging that W16, kicking and screaming to poles, and I think it's cheeky. But go on, let me tell you, you're a legend, Sir John, and I appreciate you, mate. Let me tell you about Charles Leclerc and what's going on here, because it's techie. I think Charles Leclerc's had enough. And as well, he might. Wouldn't you have had enough? How many, again, the analogy is this, how many holes can a bucket of Ferrari water have in it before it's no longer a bucket? It is just a hole. Where is the redeeming feature over at Maranello at this point? Okay, so you can talk about the pit stops. Maybe they've been consistently good, market leading with the 2-second flat pit stop. What else though, chat? Where else is there? Fix your fudging car in the first instance. It's not even the SF25. They call it the Lyco 25 after Charles Leclerc at the Singapore Grand Prix had to lift and coast as near as makes no difference the entire race. What are we doing? How could you get it so wrong? You invested all this stuff in the bloody rear suspension and got it wrong. You made sure that you built a car that was whose operating window was far too narrow. Read the Adrian Newey book. What you need to do is build yourself a car, if you're going to be quick, that works around the most frequently occurring circumstance in the calendar in 2025. What does that look like? Well, it's medium to high speed turns is what it is. And what have Ferrari built? Freudian slip. What have Ferrari built even? They've built themselves a tractor in those circumstances. They can't run the car low enough, as if they didn't know about excessive plank wear and the risk that came with that of DNFing. This is nonsensical. And then if that weren't enough, the fact that they built a tractor that they'd invested 99% of the components had changed in the final year of the rule and reg spec. As if that wasn't daft enough, then you get all of the bloody communication. We are checking. What? What are you checking, lads? F1, a game, a sport that's told, a story, told in tense. So what are you doing, Ferrari? There is durable competitive advantage in agile thinking, the ability to make a decision like this. You hear GP. You think Max Verstappen is tolerating that from GP? GP has all the answers at his fingertips. He would never say, we are checking out of shame. You would never hear that out of GP's mouth. So how do you engender confidence within the drivers, those that need it most, driving chariots of fire? How do you engender within them the confidence requisite to drive these cars at a gazillion miles per hour when it's always we are checking? What? It's nonsense. Now I understand why that happens, because there is a culture over at Maranello. Innovation is stifled. It's all about playing defense. Do you know what I mean? Making sure that your stop loss is tight. But if your stop loss is tight, you'll never make too tight even. You'll never make any money. Scared money makes no money. And they are all running scared over at Maranello and Fiorano. Have been now for some time, and therein lies the problem. They'll never be killers like Red Bull. They just don't have that killer instinct. That mentality is somehow devoid at Fiorano, and it has been for some time. Montezemolo told us that, and imagine for a second that Charles Leclerc leaves. What then? Charles Leclerc is their guy. He's like their last bastion. Sir Lewis Hamilton could do something if you build the car around him in 2026, do you know what I mean? But even then, you only get to get 2-3 years out of the fella as he approaches the twilight of his career. Charles Leclerc is the next one. He's the one that can race with Max Verstappen by dint of their length of service, the amount of races he has against Max. He understands how to be the Steven Seagal, Aikido Max Verstappen, a la the the Silverstone Grand Prix so many moons ago, 2018 or whatever. Here's what Charles Leclerc said though. And if somebody wants to tell me that Charles Leclerc will stay at Scuderia Ferrari in perpetuity, I will tell you to go and have a word with yourself. There's no way you could be a Charles Leclerc fan and encourage at this stage that dude to do one of these. He's got to pay attention to the fact that Scuderia Ferrari cannot and will not get it right, not at least in the short term, while Charles Leclerc is in the prime of his F1 career. Here's what the chat's got to say. These are definitely years when I feel I am at my best. I don't see the sunset of my career just yet, and I don't expect it to come anytime soon. Mate, Charles, don't do it, chap. These things happen all of a sudden, mate. Time is fleeting, sir. Like, he's not even 30 yet. Before you know it, you'll blink your eyes and you'll be well into your 40s. I remember when Lewis Hamilton first came on the scene. That doesn't feel like 15 years ago now. And the rest, 18 years ago. It doesn't. It feels like yesterday. Charles Leclerc, don't bide your time, sir, because F1 careers do not last forever. We will blink, and before you know it, mate, you'll be rounding third base on your career. Charles Leclerc continues, quote, "I still feel very young, but these are certainly very important years, and it will be equally important to start off on the right foot next year." It's finished, chap. Listen, you guys tell me who are worse, who are more frequent offenders as far as experts in failure, Scuderia Ferrari or Manchester United, for those of you who are football fans. I don't know, and that's saying something. I think I'd bank more on Scuderia Ferrari to continue failing more than I would Manchester United, and that's saying something, Jack, because Manchester United have been, ever since Fergie left, for those of you who are football or soccer fans, ever since Fergie left, Man United have done nothing but fail. It's really a sad circumstance. And what I don't want, for as much as I'm still a Sir Lewis Hamilton fan, despite what the naysayers will say, the abbots of unreason, trying to tell people about who they are from who they are not. As much as I'm a Sir Lewis Hamilton fan, if Lewis never wins another race, nobody will care ultimately. Toto said it. You'll only remember Lewis when he was in his pomp in the black overalls and the silver of McLaren previously. Do you know what I mean? He's won his 7 championships. Mount Rushmore of F1 guaranteed. But here's what is important as far as Charles. I don't know why I keep on doing this, chat. It's a nervous tick. I'm all over the shop today. But here's what's important for Charles Leclerc. Charles Leclerc's in his prime, chat. Here's how many championships Charles Leclerc has to his name at the time of writing. And what we desperately do, I will take the mick out of Charles Leclerc every single day of the week, but it's out of love, because point to point, he's one of the quickest, if not the quickest drivers on the grid. Could take that one to the bank. All of the F1 aficionados agree. Generally accepted knowledge at this point. What I don't want from Charles Leclerc, when all's said and done, when he's full stopping, calling time on his career, I do not want for it to be one of wasted potential. That would hurt me. But also, all banter aside, as far as, because he's a nice guy, isn't he? What I desperately don't want to happen for Charles Leclerc is for, on the epitaph of his F1 career, here lies the career of Charles Leclerc, one that was wasted at the altar of unfulfilled potential. Not insubstantial unfulfilled potential, but unfulfilled nevertheless. That I won't like that. That would be a great shame for all Formula One fans all over the world. Ferrari car sales since 2005 have doubled in the last year. They've become a modern day Chrysler. Go on then, Sir John, let's talk about that. So why did they miss analyst estimates to the tune of 0.8 billion? You know what, Sir John, the honest truth is I haven't combed through the financial statements of Scuderia Ferrari, but what I do know is this, the headlines off the top of my head. Over the course of 48 hours on the back of their quarterly results, they were expected to have nailed 9.8 billion euros as far as their top line revenue. They just barely managed 9 billion flat. So that's a miss as near as makes no difference of 10%. No, more than 10%. That's humongous. That's a big miss as far as your analyst said. Not 9.4 or 9.5, lost in the round is you missed by as near as makes no difference. A billion. That's techie. That's really, really techie as far as Ferrari. That sounds like a root and branch change is required to get them back on track, that they miss by that much, that they're so flotsam, lift and cut, can you imagine, Sir John? That they're so flotsam Jetson as far as their strategy. The F1 team is separate, of course, but it doesn't help. You know what I mean? If you're looking to sell cars, when you got 2000 to 2004 Ferrari and it's Schumacher and there it's sort of like a rising Formula One tide floats all car sales, but everybody wanted to be in a 360 and a 438 at the time because Senna before him in the NSX, but because Michael Schumacher was testing these cars around the bloody Nürburgring, so everybody wanted to be. Nobody wants to drive a Ferrari now. What? No, why? I don't want to drive. They look ugly. They're experts in failure. Ad nauseam. Why would you want to drive for Ferrari? When they start winning, then we can have a conversation again. But nobody wants to be a loser in this. It's like dancing on a bar and you're waiting for attention. Lewis can stay at Ferrari as long as he comes to grips with the fact he's driver number 2 from now on. Bloody Nora Edgar. Yeah, they'll be on top. They'll be on the top step a couple of times, but for the books. But let the young guns through. Jeez, Edgar. I would say that, but the cult. Our H's will come for me. Punctuation is very important, though, Isa. Didn't US slap tariffs on all overseas cars? That's a market collapse. I don't think. I mean, we've been here before, haven't we, Space? To be honest, I don't think those tariffs will last. I don't want to get too political, but with my financial cap very firmly on for a second, I'm not sure that those tariffs will last very long. A tariff war benefits nobody. Is the honest truth in a world that is governed by trade. Come on, Cameron, stop talking. Attention, please. What are you saying, Isa? What did Isa say? Let me go back up. Punctuation was key. Easy. If you said something worth me responding, mate, then flipping Nora. Did you ever listen to Camel? Do you have it? Safak, what's going on here? I thought we were talking about F1, not going back and forth. I've paused there, Ethan. You're not even said nothing. Go on then. As far as Ferrari, here's what you need to know. John Alcon wants himself Christian Horner. Is that the right decision? We can have that argument. Like I'm not sure necessarily that Christian Horner is the right fit for Scuderia Ferrari and what they need, whether he's the team principal fit for purpose. But is he? That's not the question. Is it? These are relative games that we're playing now. Is he more fit for purpose than Frederick Vasseur, coming off of all of the championships that he's won for Red Bull, all of the careers that he's cultivated, the 4 soon-to-be 5-time champion Max Verstappen, all of the piranhas tanks that he's navigated and mitigated for. I think Christian Horner might do a job. I think he might do a job over there at Ferrari. I think you might be surprised. Christian Horner, look, I've said it a gazillion times and I will say it again. Of all of the team principals currently on it, John Kay, I'd love to, mate, but we're talking extemporaneously. Sadly, I don't have time to scroll up. You know what I mean? I'd love, just say it again if there's something you want me to read. But like, as far of all the team principals up and down the grid, everybody loves themselves a Toto. Well, loved at least Toto when Lewis was there. I always said about Toto versus Christian Horner. If there is a dude, a team principal on the grid, with whom I'm prepared to fight, do you know what I mean? That I'm prepared to take in the trenches with me. He has a name, and his name is Christian Horner. Some would say Toto, that they don't want the duplicitous nature of Christian Horner. But Ross Brawn told you that the duplicitous is the very nature of Toto Wolff. So I don't want to do that. It's just that Toto tries to play nice and be Mr. Open and transparent and blah, blah, blah. No, I'm taking Christian Horner because he's a get-it-done type dude. 2021 shows you that he wants to win. He even said it in the Netflix documentary, didn't he? That if you really want to win, fix your fudging car. If you really want to win, you will do anything to get there. And that's where Christian Horner is. And I like my people in F1 to win. Russell wants a longer contract than 1 season, DH. 100%, mate. We talked about it. He wants a 2+1. He doesn't want to feel like he's at the behest of Max Verstappen's moves. Do you know what I mean? Well, you're gonna keep me for 1 year just in this purgatory of an F1 state, and then when Max comes along, I get relegated to the. But no, George won't feel like he deserves that, because he doesn't deserve that. He deserves a 2-year contract. Now, if I were Toto, would I want Max Verstappen? You bet your bottom dollar I would. There is fiduciary malfeasance, fiduciary malpractice, even as a team principal, if you don't go for the top dog. But if I am George, with George Russell cap very firmly on, I'm feeling like a woman scorned. Are you having a laugh? Haven't you seen the performances that I've been doing since that? I think Ferrari's issues with the organisational culture, which is tricky and sensitive thing to change, especially given the passion of the Italian media and fan base. It's techie for sure, says Time. So it is techie. It is techie. But I always say, right, that the reason why Jean Todt was so successful is that he just circled the wagons around his employees. You guys go over there and build a fast car and focus on racing. See, all of this politics, all of the John Elkins and C-suite exec bods, I will hold them off. I will put up the shield and shelter you guys from the fire of the politics and corporate peacocking. So Jean Todt just had them just go away and work on the car, like Ross Brawn wasn't involved. Like, Jean Todt played backstop defense to the rest of the team so they could focus on nothing other than winning races. I don't think that, as nice a lad as Frederick Vasseur is, as sound an F1 mind as Fred is, I don't think he's got that. I mean, you need to be bloody Littlefinger in Game of Thrones, right? Or Cersei. It's that level of political understanding. Do you know what I mean? It's in the Game of Thrones, you either win or you lie with a D. Like it's no Max Glazing. Safak, I want to stay. They'll come for me, Safak. But on Twitter doing it all day, each and every single day. Right? Not me personally, but James Allen said, didn't it? Shall I read out this? As we read third base, Safak's invoked some Max Verstappen glazing. So I was listening to James Allen on F1 podcast, one of the god tierest podcasts out there, by the way, and one of the best, goatiest F1 journos to have ever goated, or broadcasters at the very least, is James Allen. Edgar, you're an absolute legend. I appreciate you, mate. Gifting memberships. You put a big smile on my face, Edgar. Legend. Thank you, sir. Here's what James Allen had to say, and I tweeted this out. If you're not, we're doing bits over on Twitter now. Cameron CC is the handle. Instead of an A after the C, it's an X. Go and follow me over there if you're not already, because we're dropping bars. Here's what James Allen had to say, and this is where it gets techier than techie things. James Allen said this on the James Allen podcast, the latest one. Space Ghost. What are you saying, Space Ghost? Space Ghost, you gotta, rather than just saying something like that, chap, you've gotta just gotta repeat it, mate. You're not the only one in here, chap. Ross Brawn used to say of Michael Schumacher that he wins the races he should win, and also those he shouldn't, and that's what makes him a great driver. I think we're looking at exactly the same thing here with Max, aren't we? Interesting. I mean, at this juncture, how can you do? You can't disagree. You can if you want to, but put forth where's the evidence to say that James Allen's not barking at the right tree? Even the guys over at the race, for all of their British bias, were like, George was all right at the Singapore Grand Prix, but he was hardly Max. It was hardly Max at Suzuka when he's outperforming the car. Well, how do you know? Because George was able to pull away in the race, but in Suzuka, Max had to spend like 100% of the race fending off charging McLaren. So that's how you know. That's how you know that Max didn't have the fastest car, because McLaren did. They were hounding him all throughout the race. No, Safak, is he? But listen, we'll I'm sure over the next 6 races, we'll have plenty of opportunity to talk about Max Verstappen. I mean, he's not going anywhere, is he? Max Verstappen, are you having a giraffe? Like, he's gets techier than techie things. Listen, you guys have been legends each and every single time. If you're brand new members, get over to the community tab and get yourself in the Discord. There will be a link. Thank you to each and every single one of you, as always, for popping along and indulging me in my very B-spec noddy brand of talking F1 in a way that's extemporaneous. Between now and next time, 10 a.m, 8 p.m. tomorrow, the prosecution rests. No further questions, Your Honour.